Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about 65 degrees here in Los Angeles. And I hope you are experiencing the same across the country. We have a wonderful guest today, and Natalie McLean. We'll get to the introductions in a second. Wine Talks is available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, you name it, we are there. And always sponsored by the original Wine of the Month Club, now sporting the Bordeaux and Napa series. But let's get to the show because this is a lot of fun. I was fortunate enough to be on her show recently, and we wanted to get her on Wine Talks because this is Natalie McLean, all the way from Canada. What part of Canada are we in, Natalie?
I'm in Ottawa, the capital, the snowy capital.
The snow, is it cold up there today?
It's getting warm, our kind of warm, though. I should redefine what warm is after hearing your weather report. We're in Celsius, so the conversion always escapes me, but it's about plus 8 degrees Celsius right now. So we're above freezing.
So it's 16, there's 16, that's like 30, that's like 46.
Exactly. So
45.
we're all wearing shorts and t-shirts as a result because we are Canadian. We are winter hardy.
See, I set out when I was a kid, as a teenager, I was going to come up with my own conversion because It's a linear conversion from Celsius to centigrade, from centigrade to Fahrenheit. You have to have sort of a moving scale.
Yes.
But I double the centigrade and I add 28. That'll
go.
get you within a couple of degrees either way. And as it gets warmer, then that scale changes a little bit. But I want to read your accolades because this is very important. Primarily, you consider yourself the chief, of wine happiness. And we're going to get to that
Absolutely.
in a second. We're going to define that. But you're author of the book Red, White, and Drunk All Over, an our kind of book, a wine-soaked journey from grape to glass. And here's a picture of it. And the book Unquenchable, a tipsy quest for the world's best bargain wines. And here she happens to have a copy with her now. You also have won James Beard Fisher Distinguished Writing Award, Calling the Shots, James Beard Award for the Internet Column and Feature Writing, easy for me to say, Dining in the Wild Wild West, Lady Sings the Booze. These are clever names. Lady Sings the Booze.
I can't resist a good pun. I just
Red,
can't.
White, and Drunk All Over. And Waiter, There's a Flaw in My Wine. So all interesting subjects. It reminds me of the joke, hey, waiter, what's that fly doing in my soup? And he says the backstroke. So tell us about this journey, because it also suggests in some of the internet articles about you and what you've done that your husband got you into this. Is that true? Is the husband...
Absolutely. Well, I say I started drinking when I met my husband and haven't found a reason to stop. He's now my ex-husband, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's
you
all
gotta
good.
give some credit.
Wine helped. I actually specialize in divorce wine tastings, which Cabernet pairs best with burning love letters. But anyway, that's another topic and another tasting.
No, we're gonna have to talk about that for sure.
Okay. I
Okay,
can
but go ahead.
pair wines with if you found yourself a good divorce lawyer and it's a great prenup, or not
Okay,
prenup,
that's
but the after
funny.
the fact. Anyway, I'm getting
Yes.
carried away. I'm
That's
prone to
funny.
that. But I did get into wine with him. We were two MBAs, A-type personalities, and we moved to Toronto together. And as we met in business school, so we started first taking Spanish at night and sort of conjugating Spanish verbs and all that after a long day at work. He was at Citibank, I was at Procter and Gamble. That just we couldn't hack it. Then we thought, let's take up golf. And that was a really bad idea because, type
Wow.
A personalities, with long iron clubs, not a good pairing. Then I saw a wine course at our local college, and I thought, we can drink at night. That will calm us down and we'll have fun. And so it started with that. We took it together. I continued for the full sommelier diploma program, but he just took the one course and enjoyed it.
Well, you said a mouthful there. I have to ask a couple of questions because Ottawa is what part? My North American geography is not very good as far as Canada is concerned. What part of the country is it?
That's okay. We're in Ontario. We're about an hour flight from Toronto. We're actually the country's capital, but we're so snowy here. Voltaire described Canada once as a few acres of snow. So no one
Well,
knows where we are. We're the great white north. So we leave
but
it
at
at
least
that.
you've got accolades from Voltaire, so that's great.
Yeah.
But Spanish? I mean, seriously, why would you take up Spanish?
Be- because we're
Why not
type
French at
A's.
least?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, well, we learned French in school.
Mm,
So, we thought being such obsessive compulsives, let's get another language just for fun. And learning languages is beautiful, but not after an 10-hour workday at
that's
two
very
very
hard.
intense companies. It was like, oh my gosh, please.
It's very hard. My listeners have heard this before, but I started about 5 years ago studying French, and I was hell bent to learn it. And my dad speaks French because in Cairo, where he grew up, in the 30s, French was the second language
Ah,
of the Arabic country until the English, the protectorate came in, and then English became obviously the second language. But if you watch film from the 30s from Cairo, most of the signs, business signs, are in Arabic and in French.
huh.
So it's hard to do. You have to be really disciplined to do it, and
Yeah.
I have to get up early in the morning to speak with the. There's actually services now. There's one called italki.com in
Oh,
case you
yeah.
want to resurrect your Spanish
No, thanks.
pursuit.
It's good to know. Good to know.
So, and then the golf thing's hilarious because it reminds me of the Raymond episode where they decide as a couple they're going to play golf together and sort of take
Yeah.
on the husband's hobby. And it
Right.
doesn't go well in the
Doesn't go
episode.
well. No,
So
no. I had this long club and I'm in the sand pit going, I don't
I
need
hate
any
this.
more tips, darling.
Yeah. And that would happen
Yeah.
for sure. So, but it did say like he suggested that you take wine classes. Was there any wine enthusiasm prior to that besides just, catching a buzz late at night?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I cottoned onto wine because I was working for. I went from Procter and Gamble to a high tech company that's now the headquarters of Google in Mountain View. So I started arranging my meetings, quarterly meetings, on a Friday or a Thursday, so I could drive up to Napa. Because the one thing when you're working in an intense job, the one thing you can do is take clients out to dinner and start to gain an appreciation for wine, that sort of thing. So there was no time for golf, thank goodness, but I started to learn about wine. And so that was always there in the background. And so we both thought, yeah, that sounds good. Let's find out what we're drinking so we know what to buy and how to pair it with food and that sort of thing.
Was it intimidating back then? Because Procter and Gamble, for one, being corporate America, I mean, the huge company, and I want to get into that marketing, the guerrilla marketing that they do a little bit if we can. But was it intimidating for you to start? You're trying to entertain clients. You're going to dinner. You look at the wine list. That's very confusing. Each wine
Right.
list is different. How did that go for you?
Well, the first experience I actually remember was pre Procter and Gamble when I was at the end of or near the end of the MBA. We were all getting interviews, and I went for one with McKinsey and Company, which is a consulting company. And the final rounds, you went to dinner with a partner, and he was shaking down his Rolex watch and his little Burberry cufflinks and all the rest of it. And he goes, "Why don't you choose the wine?" And so I had nothing, no experience except maybe cold baby duck back of the high school portable. That was it. Like that was the
We
extent
used to
of
sell that, by the way, just so you know.
no dissing it, but that was just that was my experience. So
Yeah.
I thought, well, and I'm scanning the wine list and just sweating bullets because I feel like this is a test, and it was, it was as part of the interview. And so I thought, oh, I'll choose something safe and fancy, Mondavi Cabernet from California. So I went with that, and then I sort of look up, and he goes, "Well, that's going to be interesting with my Dover Soul." Anyway, learned later that's kind of an
Really?
incredibly bad match. Didn't get the job. Don't think it was because of the wine choice, but I never felt so intimidated and so like I need to know what this wine stuff is all about because I never want to feel that way again because it's something that gives us pleasure, but it's also wine is something that can make us feel very uptight and very small town girl in my case.
It's that's an interesting story because here you are, the pressure of an interview, so to speak, and sort of a social. And I just had a friend of mine's son just was interviewed for a job, and the last interview was they took him to a bar, And
Oh,
this is
wow.
a high-end real estate firm that does a lot of big business across America, and they wanted to know how he socialized, in that environment.
Hmm.
And he was sort of in that environment. Normally would say, "Well, I'm not going to order a drink because that might be a bad thing." But they wanted him to order a drink and understand how he reacts to that in
Sure.
that situation, which I thought was interesting. But
Absolutely.
the it seems to me, and I this is for the listeners and for people that are trying to study wine, I want to learn about wine, that isn't intimidating. It's even intimidating for us if I'm on a list that I don't know. In other words, it's
Yes.
always handed to me, right? You probably get the list everywhere you go,
Hmm.
whether you're with guests or friends or family. They go, "Oh, give the list to Natalie. She understands wine." And then you look at it and you go, "Gee, I don't think I've had that Burgundy. I don't think I've had that Bordeaux." And then we go back to the stuff that we've may recognize or we've tasted before. And I was responsible for the wine at an Easter gathering years ago with my in-laws down Palm Springs, and I forgot to bring it. Okay, so
Ah,
that's the first mistake. So
oops.
then I went to the market, and just like every other consumer, I went to the market, started looking at the wines, and I'm going, I never tasted that, so I really don't know if it's proper or balanced or whatever acronyms we're trying to look for, adjectives we're looking for. And I made a bad decision. One of them was really good value. The other one wasn't so great, and I bought it on the brand. So that it takes confidence to do this, doesn't it? To
It does. And you're right, Paul. Like restaurant wine lists, if they're any good, are trying to get wines that you haven't tried before or that aren't, often stocked in liquor stores or that sort of thing, because they want to give you a new taste experience. So that puts us, even as experienced tasters,
hmm
often in the same seat, because I don't know. And, am I going to take a chance on that, whatever, $75, $50 Burgundy or whatever it would be, a lot more expensive on a
Yeah,
restaurant
well,
list.
yeah, I
Yeah.
wish.
And exactly. And so, I always defer to the sommelier if I'm in a place that cares about wine. Like, what do you think of this wine? Or, we're having the veal and the chicken. Do you think this wine will
hmm
work? And the thing that people come back at me for is, well, how can I signal how much I want to, pay, especially if you
Right.
don't want to declare out loud how much you're willing to pay for love on a date or business. And I just tip the wine list toward me and just point at the prices. Only the
Oh,
sommelier is
clever.
server. Yeah. And I'll say, I want something in this range. And everyone else thinks I'm thinking, talking style or region, but
Yeah,
I'm
right.
signaling this is how much I want to pay.
That's the
Anyway,
other intimidating thing, though, is
it
that
is.
if you're with guests that you're not sure what their budgeting is like or whether they're used to spending $100 on a bottle of wine or not, you're sort of intimidated. So when we were in at Paul Bocuse
Ooh,
in Lyon, I was able
fancy.
to say the quatre consommes dollars type thing to the somme because my guests didn't know what that meant, and I was
Ah,
telling him I wanted a Bordeaux in the $400 range, and that was easy. But you're right; you're worried like somebody in front of you, that your guests are going to go $100,
yeah.
in the back of their mind, and you're going, "Oh, I guess I'm buying, right?"
Yes,
But that's an
exactly.
interesting comment, though. The somme's role at a restaurant, a real restaurant that has a real wine list, not one that's produced by the local wholesaler, is pretty important to help guide clients through and interpret what you're asking them for. You pointed to the dollar amount, but stylistically, they have to interpret what we tell them. Well, we like, and the way I do that, maybe it's the same, is I ask people what they usually drink. I
Yes.
drink, Jordan, or I usually drink Silver Oak or whatever, and then we can at least get a style through that. But how do you recommend to people at a restaurant that are trying to decipher a menu, a wine list, and explain to the somm what they're doing?
Exactly. That's a great tip. Really great tip.
Like, just
Hmm.
what are we drinking? What are we
Yes.
drinking doing? So, what is the chief of wine happiness? I mean, that's a self-proclaimed thing, or is that a
Oh, yeah.
degree that you earn?
Degree. I would love to go to that school. Oh my goodness. I just have to figure out my minor and my major. But chief of wine happiness. I mean, I recognize that wine is pleasure. For most of us, we are just buying a glass of pleasure. We are not signing up for the encyclopedia of wine, though
hmm
that's great if you want to dive headfirst into wine, with all of the different facets and knowledge. But at bottom, I think most of us just want to relax with friends, have a good glass that's not going to disappoint them, and that's my mission. So I put that rather than any initials or degrees or diplomas or anything beside my name.
Well, I think that's an important distinction. I want the listeners to understand. I mean, I have full respect for MWs and MSs and anybody that's pursuing that. And in California, just to sell wine now is as an entry level job. If you just want to get in the streets and go to liquor stores and restaurants and sell them wine, you need something. You need a WITSET degree or level one's SOM certification, something that says you're attempting to learn a little bit. And
Yes.
so those certifications are important, particularly in jobs where it's important to have knowledge, but they certainly are not degrees to the extent that we can't learn the same thing by studying ourselves. Okay, I want to make that really clear. I think maybe the confidence issue comes into play when you have that degree. In other words, I have really good friends that really understand wine, but they still describe it with a question mark at the end. I taste blackberries,
Right,
do I
right.
taste, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, I taste blackberries. That's what I
right.
taste.
Like an exclamation mark. Say wet violets in spring, and everybody will agree with you. But
Right. That's right.
that's exactly what I what I
I got to
get
start
from
using
my,
that.
yeah, yeah. Well, just as long as you say it with power.
Right.
But that's exactly why, I teach online wine food pairing classes. It's people don't necessarily want to become masters of wine, most of us, but we want to become the expert on our own palate. And that is that confidence to go into a liquor store and not default to the same bottle every time,
Hmm.
or to join a wine club, of course, and to experiment and to have the confidence. I know what I like. I know when I want to branch out and try something new. I know what pairs with a variety of dishes. That's why, people come to me, at least for the online pairing courses that I offer, because it's a very small percentage of the population that want to become true experts in the way that master of wine and master sommelier can do for you.
Well, it's a pursuit. It's a pursuit of education, like anything
Mm-hmm.
else. If you want to learn a language, you pursue it through all the means you can, and there's plenty of resources online to read about wine and books. I've got a huge library of books accumulated over the years. So you said something important though, the ethereal value of a glass of wine. I want people, as you put it, to just enjoy the glass of wine they're having.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I can't predict everybody's palate and what they're going to like, though we find something really interesting. Like the other day, I tasted a Canary Islands Lisbon Negro. I'm like, never heard of the grape,
Wow.
and I really enjoyed the wine. It may not that everybody enjoys it, but your idea that we want to relax with a good glass of wine. And what does that mean, good glass of wine? Well, I think it's perfectly fine, and I do it all the time, and I know it's hard to imagine. I dump out a lot of wine.
Oh,
Now, maybe
yes.
because I have access to it, but I don't want to suffer through a glass of wine. Why would I
Life's
want to
too
do that?
short. Yep, life's
Yeah.
too short. And
So it,
and we're trying to drink within moderation limits. So you can only consume so much alcohol, and that's
that's
drinking,
true
not
too.
tasting. So you got to choose wisely, I think, just like
I'm
everything
testing.
else in life. Yes.
Well, you want to test the limits of, you can only drink so much alcohol. Probably tested the limits too many times on that. But I was tasting the other day, and I'm not sure if we talked about this on your show, but I was tasting the other day, and I tasted a Shiner, a wine with no label, and I tasted. I said, and we're going through a wedding right now. My daughter's getting married in a couple of weeks. Actually,
Congratulations.
wait a minute, thank you. It's less than that now. It's scary. And I think to myself, well, I suppose if this wine had a private label on it and it was part of a venue that did a lot of weddings, this would be okay. And I stopped myself. This is my own thought. Wasn't talking to anybody. I was talking to myself. I'm like, no, actually, if I'm going to have a wedding and invite guests, I want to pour nice wines. I want people to feel what you're talking about. Relax, maybe even have a conversation about the wine at the table with the other guests. Why would I sacrifice one of the most important parts of the meal? Let me cut back on the valet budget. Let me cut back and have
Exactly.
a band that's not so good.
Yeah. It's like
So,
buying a fancy car without having the money to pay for gas. I mean, it's like make
good
room
point.
for it. It's
Yes,
just,
that's what I think.
yeah.
There's I wanted to talk about your book, the Red, White, and Drunk All Over. So when you after you set out to learn about wine with your husband, how long did? By the way, just for fun, how long did the the ensemble lessons last?
Oh, he only took the one course. Our marriage
Oh,
lasted longer. That was a good 20 years. So, but yeah, he was done because then he deferred to me. You know how you do often in a relationship. Okay, you do wine, I'll do finances or whatever. That's
yeah, right.
so stereotypical. But anyway, yeah, he did the one intro course with me, and then I took over.
Did you learn? Did you learn like his palate? Because I have my wife's palate is totally different than mine, and
Yeah.
I ensure that I bring home things that she will appreciate. And I sometimes open two bottles because I don't feel like it.
Exactly. Yeah, no,
But
he had a different palate, and so does my current partner, Miles. And at first,
mm,
Miles was drinking very inexpensive Australian Shiraz, and I thought, oh, great.
wow,
And then so I'd start opening wines, and one night he noticed that my red wine was a different color. He said, "What's that?" And I just said, "Red wine. You have red wine. I have red wine." And
as basic as it gets.
exactly. And then he said, "No, what that looks different." And so I had to explain to him that it was a Rhone Valley from Gigal, and it was pricier. So
Wow.
he said, "I want to taste." This sounds awful of me, but he took a taste and he loved it. And then from there, he's been so much more expensive to keep in line.
Oh,
He got rid of the inexpensive Shiraz and then just switched to that. So, but still, our tastes still differ. I mean, generally, I actually enjoy Pinot, but he's still on that pricey Gigal Rhone Valley
you
stuff.
got to keep him from going north. You know, don't get him into
Oh,
the
I
Côte de
know.
Nuit, or you're going to be in
No,
big problems.
exactly, exactly. There is no north. France ends
No,
there for
that's
wine.
right.
At the Rhone Valley. That's it.
How this is a conversation I had yesterday with a woman who's trying to look into the idea of starting a club for a very well known trade magazine, or not trade magazine but consumer magazine. And she lives in New York, and I said, you can go to there's fine wine shops in New York on almost every corner, it seems like, and you can find really really nice wines there. In Canada, is it the same? I mean, how do you buy wine in Canada? What's the availability of different things like Guigel, your Rhone wines, or Côte de Nuit Burgundies? What's the general availability given the liquor laws in Canada?
Well, we're still more suffering from prohibition hangover than you are in the States, in that most of the provinces have government controlled liquor stores. So in Ontario, we have the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, LCBO.
Hmm.
And
The
although there are,
famed.
exactly, and there are a few wine shops that are grandfathered into existence because wineries opened wine shops, and so they're allowed to exist. But we do not have a privatized system here. They do in Alberta and in spots across the country, but it's very regulated. And so the availability depends on the buying power of those near monopolies. So the LCBO does have a lot of buying power, does present a lot of wines through its stores, but we don't have a store that's, like Tuscany is us kind of thing. If you just want to specialize in Tuscany, you really do have to go with the availability of what's in those liquor stores.
Actually, yesterday I was looking for pricing on the Bordeaux I really liked, and I just found in Southern California a Bordeaux shop. I'm like, wow,
Ah,
that can't be like doing that great. But actually,
yeah,
during COVID, actually, it's been very good. But I just when you said the LCBO, which I think it's like one of the largest retailers in the world, right? I mean,
it
they
is.
buy everything,
Hmm.
and Pennsylvania, up until recently in the U.S., was the largest U.S. retailer because they had the same sort of restrictions, but just in a state level instead of a country level. But I just realized, okay, so Canada suffering from a little bit of post-prohibition, and then headed south to the U.S., we suffer from it. But Joe Kennedy was smart enough to give all his friends regional control over the booze distribution, so at least we have some freedom and each state has control over it, and some are more free than others.
Hmm.
But then you go to Europe, and I'm wondering if there's a relationship between the amount of time wine has been part of the culture
Hmm.
and the freedom to buy it and express it. So
Yes.
Europe, there's no problem, right?
Right.
Yeah, most of the rest of the world is no problem. Then you go to the U.S., we suffered through prohibition. It was political football, still is. But we're a little freer than Canada, and now Canada probably the tail end of alcohol being part of the culture has the most restrictions, and why has this become a political thing? Why can't we just experience life as the Europeans do? Is there
Well,
any wind of change coming or no?
oh yeah, I think change is coming, but wine has always been politicized, whether it's tariff disputes or just the sin taxes put on alcohol, like it is on gasoline and other goods that the government feels we don't really need to consume. Um, but I do think change is coming, and consumers demand it. But now, in a COVID, hopefully we're coming out of COVID, but in this environment, laws are starting to loosen. For example, restaurants could never deliver alcohol with meals. Now they can. Those laws have been changed,
Hmm.
and the word is they're going to stay changed. So you've got all of these restaurants now opening up their own wine delivery business, because they can include a saltine cracker and that's the food,
Yeah.
and then just sell your stock of wine. And as we know, Paul, in the restaurant business, customers will eat you poor and drink you rich. The margin is
That's right.
in all of the alcohol, but even the tea and the coffee. So I think change is coming. It took a disruptor, an inflection point like COVID, that I think is an accelerant that brought the future forward 10 years. But that's a good thing, because we're starting to get more options, and I think it will continue.
Well, you're right. I agree with that. And in America, it changes fluidly. In 1988, when I bought the company for my father, nobody really cared. I mean, you just shipped because it wasn't a thing then. My dad invented the idea in the 70s, so even in the early 80s and late 80s, you just did it. If you loaded the UPS truck with 200 boxes and you only manifested 150, nobody really cared, and they could have gone anywhere. And we had reciprocity states in California. So if Minnesota or Missouri wrote a law that resembled our law, which said basically, hey, we can ship wine to your state and you can ship wine to our state, and we don't care. We're not going to tariff or tax anybody. And those are still around, but they're different than they were. A lot of them went different ways. And so we're still seeing in the U.S. Challenges to liquor laws, in some states strapping down more and other states loosening it up.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the problem with America is we're getting sued now for shipping stuff. There was an article came out the other day where it was determined that 1 in 3 bottles shipped to Michigan last year were illegal, whatever that means. And I would suggest it's probably more than that, not illegal, but
Sure.
I mean that's probably 2 in 3 bottles are illegal. But it's up to us for a lifestyle to decide, in my opinion. If we want to have wine in our meal and we want to be able to buy it openly, I think the consumer has to step up. We have a group here called Free the Grapes, and be able
Yes.
to have access to whatever we want. Now,
Exactly.
what's interesting about the human race is that we're very creative. So when the governor of California shows up at the French Laundry, and for $800 a seat, which we were there 2 weeks before he went, I'm sure you're aware of the story, and my wife is like, I want to go in the room, because the French Laundry has 4 or 5 rooms, and normally during regular hours there's 4 or 5 tables in each room. But what they decided to do during COVID was that you could rent one room privately at that time, and then this per seat cost prefix came $800.
Wow.
Okay, and if you're outside in the regular dining area during the patio, it was $400. Okay, so it's expensive.
What a deal.
Yeah. But Newsom was in the $800 section, just so you know, just set the record straight. But after that, Newsom decided that he was going to tell us what was acceptable food. And you said he could deliver a saltine. The Canadian wine delivery can have a saltine and call it food, right? So we were serving 25-cent top ramen at some of the bars to get around that code, right?
Right.
It works. Then they came out, this is a true story, they came out with a list of foods that qualify for brasserie-style food.
Wow.
So it was okay to serve a chicken breast on a plate, but not chicken wings. Okay? I mean, seriously.
Too much time on their hands who are making these.
Can you imagine this? It was written that way. It was literally written in an article in the code that chicken breast qualifies for real food at a brasserie, but chicken wing does not. And boggles your mind. And then you have to, who's going to enforce this? I mean, who's going to go around and be the chicken
Exactly.
wing,
Was that a wing
chicken
or
wing
a breast?
police?
I'm sorry, it's all cut up now. I can't tell you. But Paul, we have that same thing going on in Canada. Our laws in terms of cross-border shipping are nuts. Like, and again, it's largely due, I believe, to the liquor stores who don't want to lose their revenue, or who want to keep taking the tax revenue and turning it, well, they do turn it over to the government, but still it's a way of maintaining control. But we have free my grapes as well. But what surprises me is that wine is the most value added agricultural product we produce in this country, and
Hmm.
probably yours as well. It's the only product we put in the original packaging on the dinner table. We don't, I think we talked about this. We don't have the stickers on the apples or the strawberries. And yet we're not allowing these small farmers, which is what wineries are, to increase their market, and allowing consumers to increase their diversity of taste from something that is truly homegrown. I mean, it boggles my mind that we are not supporting farmers in this way.